You know what your problem is, Krasthul? Lieutenant Commander Elijah Bennett leaned against the viewport, arms crossed, with that infuriating smirk plastered across his face. You take yourself way too seriously. The Draconian ambassador's scales rippled in barely contained fury. All 7 feet of him tensed, membrane wings twitching at the insult. His species had conquered 16 star systems before humans had invented the wheel. My problem, human, Krasthul hissed, is that your kind refuses to understand your place in this galaxy. Elijah shrugged, examining his fingernails. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I watched this exchange from across the diplomatic chamber, mentally calculating how quickly I could reach the emergency shuttles if this went sideways. My name's Tarin Voss, First Officer of the Terran diplomatic vessel Audacity. That makes me both Elijah's superior officer and, unfortunately, his designated babysitter. The Galactic Confederation summit was supposed to be routine. 3 days of tedious negotiations over mining rights in the Cygnus arm. Instead, here we were, 20 minutes in, and Elijah was already antagonizing the representative of the most militaristic species in known space. Just another day at the office. Look, I should probably back up a bit. You need some context here. Humans weren't supposed to be at this summit at all. We're the new kids on the galactic block. Barely 2 decades since first contact, and most species still view us as cosmic toddlers who somehow got their hands on FTL technology. To be fair, they're not entirely wrong. The only reason Earth had a seat at the table was because of a clerical error by some unfortunate Arthropian bureaucrat who'd confused humans with the Humari, a respected elder race of telepathic gas clouds. By the time anyone noticed, diplomatic protocol prevented them from rescinding the invitation without causing a major incident. So they sent us the formal invitation, probably expecting we'd decline or send some low-level diplomat who would sit quietly and observe. Instead, Earth Central Command sent Elijah Bennett, humanity's most decorated space explorer and absolute worst diplomat. Do you understand what you've done? Krasthul's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. The Hive Concordat will interpret this as a direct provocation. Their delegation is already drafting formal protests. Oh no, formal protests, Elijah mock gasped, placing a hand over his heart. However will we survive? I closed my eyes briefly, counting to 10 in Arthropian, which has 37 syllables per number, and is excellent for restraining homicidal impulses toward one's colleagues. The irony is Elijah wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, he was Earth's golden boy, the first human to make contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, the hero who negotiated our species' entry into galactic society, the trailblazer who mapped unexplored sectors beyond the Orion Arm. That was before Proxima Centauri, before everything changed. Ambassador Krasthul, I interjected, stepping forward with my most professional smile. Perhaps we could take a brief recess? I believe the Centaurian delegation has prepared refreshments in the eastern atrium. The Draconian's slitted pupils fixed on me. This is not over, human, he growled, before sweeping from the room, his ceremonial cape billowing dramatically. Once he was gone, I rounded on Elijah. What the hell was that? Diplomatic engagement? He offered innocently. You almost started an interstellar incident, I hissed. Again. Elijah shrugged, moving to the viewport where the massive Confederation station hung in orbit around Proxima Centauri b. You worry too much, Tarin. The Draconians respect strength. Show weakness and they'll walk all over you. There's a difference between showing strength and acting like an absolute... My tirade was interrupted by a soft chirp from my communicator. A holographic notification appeared. Urgent. Security breach. Level 3. Elijah's eyes narrowed. He'd seen it too. That's near the main reactor. Before I could respond, the station's alarm system activated, bathing the room in pulsing red light. A computerized voice echoed through the chambers. Security alert. All delegates, please return to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. Elijah was already moving toward the door. That familiar gleam in his eyes. The one that had earned him medals of valor and multiple official reprimands. Elijah, wait! I called after him. Central Command specifically ordered us to avoid... But he was already gone. I swore under my breath and followed. Someone had to make sure he didn't get himself killed. Or worse, start a war. The corridor outside the diplomatic chamber was chaos. Delegates from 24 species rushing in all directions. Security personnel attempting to establish order. Translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping instructions in 60 different languages. I spotted Elijah's tall frame moving purposefully against the flow of traffic, heading deeper into the station rather than toward the evacuation points. Typical. Excuse me, pardon me. Diplomatic emergency. I muttered, squeezing past a cluster of alarmed Gelth diplomats. their gelatinous bodies quivering with distress. By the time I caught up with Elijah, he had already reached a security checkpoint. 2 Arthropian guards were blocking access to the next section. Restricted area, the larger one buzzed, mandibles clicking. All personnel must proceed to evacuation zones. Elijah flashed his credentials. Lieutenant Commander Bennett, Tarin Diplomatic Corps. We received reports of suspicious activity in the reactor section. The Arthropians exchanged looks. We have no such reports, the smaller one said. That's because your communication systems have been compromised. Elijah replied smoothly. Check subchannel frequency 478.3. While the guards conferred, I pulled Elijah aside. What are you doing? I whispered furiously. And what's on subchannel 478.3? Nothing, he whispered back. But it'll take them at least 2 minutes to check, and by then... He gestured subtly to a service hatch on the wall behind the guards. I groaned internally. Elijah, no. Elijah, yes, he grinned, and then louder to the guards. My colleague and I will wait right here while you verify. The moment the guards turned to their console, Elijah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the service hatch. Before I could protest, he had keyed in an override code, pushed me inside and followed, sealing the hatch behind us. How did you even know that code? I demanded as we crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel. I memorized the station schematics and security protocols before we arrived, he replied, as if this were perfectly normal behavior. Standard preparation. For what? Committing felonies? For saving lives, he said, his voice suddenly serious. This isn't a drill, Tarin. Something's wrong. I can feel it. I wanted to argue, but there was something in his tone that stopped me. For all his faults, Elijah's instincts had saved our lives more times than I cared to count. We emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a deserted corridor. The alarm lights cast everything in an eerie red glow, but the evacuation announcements were muted here, as if coming from a great distance. Level 3 reactor control should be 2 sections ahead, Elijah said, checking a holographic map projected from his wrist device. We moved cautiously forward, the strange quiet broken only by the distant wail of alarms and the soft hum of the station's systems. As we approached the reactor section, Elijah suddenly held up a hand, signaling me to stop. Listen, he whispered. At first I heard nothing, then voices. Not the panicked shouts of evacuating diplomats, but calm, measured tones. And something else, a strange rhythmic clicking sound. Elijah's face hardened. Quilorians, he murmured. My blood ran cold. The Quilorians were a notoriously isolationist species from the far edge of the galaxy, known for their advanced technology and utter disdain for other life forms. They weren't members of the Confederation. In fact, they had rejected all diplomatic overtures for centuries. What would they be doing here? I whispered. And how can you be sure? That clicking sound is their secondary communication method. Subsonic frequencies their translator devices can't fully mask. Elijah replied. And as for what they're doing here... His expression darkened. Nothing good. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a compact pulse pistol. You brought a weapon to a peace summit? I hissed incredulously. And yet, strangely, I'm not the one apologizing right now, he quipped, checking the charge. Stay here. I'm going to get closer, see what they're up to. Absolutely not, I grabbed his arm. We need to alert station security. With what? The comms are jammed in this section. That's why the alarms sound so distant. By the time we get back to a working communication terminal and convince security to investigate, it might be too late. Too late for what? Elijah's eyes met mine. That's what I'm going to find out. Before I could stop him, he had slipped around the corner and disappeared from view. I swore silently, then drew my own concealed weapon. Apparently I wasn't the only rule breaker on this mission, and followed. The corridor opened into a large circular chamber, the auxiliary control room for the station's main reactor. Through the observation window, I could see the pulsing blue core of the antimatter reactor that powered the entire station. And gathered around the control panels were 5 figures in sleek metallic environmental suits that covered them completely. Quilorians. Their exoskeletons made soft clicking sounds as they worked at the controls, long segmented digits moving with unsettling precision. I ducked behind the equipment rack, scanning the room for Elijah. At first, I didn't see him. Then I spotted a flash of movement near the ceiling. He was in the maintenance crawl space above the Quilorians, positioned directly over the central control console. What was he planning? I got my answer a moment later when one of the Quilorians removed something from a carrying case, a device about the size of a human forearm, covered in pulsing lights and unfamiliar technology. Final sequence initiated, the Quilorian announced, its translator rendering the clicks into flat, emotionless standard galactic. Detonation in 300 seconds. A bomb. They were planning to blow up the station, with every major diplomatic delegation in the galaxy on board. Before I could react, Elijah dropped from the ceiling, landing directly on the Quilorian holding the device. The alien went down with a screech of surprise, the bomb skittering across the floor. "Sorry to drop in uninvited," Elijah quipped, rolling to his feet and firing his pulse pistol at another Quilorian who was reaching for a weapon. "But I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to cancel your demolition plans." The remaining 3 Quilorians scattered, drawing weapons of their own. Energy blasts sizzled through the air as they returned fire. I emerged from my hiding place, providing covering fire for Elijah as he dove behind a console. "This is your plan?" I shouted over the din. "A frontal assault against 5 armed hostiles?" "Not the entire plan," he called back, firing blind over the console. "Just the improvised first part. And the rest of the plan? Working on it." A Quilorian blast hit the console near my head, showering me with sparks. I ducked lower, returning fire. My shot caught one of the aliens in the shoulder, spinning it around but not downing it. "The bomb!" Elijah shouted, pointing to where the device had fallen. Its lights were pulsing faster now, a digital display counting down, 240, 239, 238. "Cover me!" I yelled, then broke from my position, racing toward the bomb. Energy blasts sizzled past me as I ran, the Quilorians concentrating their fire on my exposed position. Just as I reached the device, a blast caught me in the side, sending me sprawling. Pain lanced through my body, but I managed to grab the bomb as I fell. The casing was warm to the touch, vibrating slightly as the countdown continued. 220, 219. "Tarin!" Elijah's voice seemed distant through the ringing in my ears. I looked up to see him engaged in hand-to-hand combat with 2 Quilorians, his pulse pistol apparently depleted. Despite being outnumbered, he was holding his own, his movements a blur as he countered the aliens' attacks. I forced myself to focus on the bomb. The design was unfamiliar. Quilorian technology was notoriously advanced and secretive. The display now read 198 seconds remaining. "Elijah," I called. "I need some help here." He glanced my way. Then with a sudden burst of speed, he grabbed one Quilorian and hurled it into the other. Both aliens crashed into a control panel, momentarily stunned. Elijah used the opportunity to sprint to my side. "How bad?" he asked, eyeing my injury. "I'll live," I grimaced. "But we might not if we can't disarm this thing." Elijah examined the bomb, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's quantum-locked," he muttered. "Any attempt to force it open will trigger immediate detonation." "Can you disarm it?" "Not in the conventional sense, no." His eyes darted around the room, then fixed on something behind me. "But maybe we don't have to." I followed his gaze to a maintenance hatch marked Emergency Ejection System. "If we can get it into an ejection pod," Elijah explained, "we can launch it far enough from the station that the blast won't cause critical damage." "And how exactly do we get past them?" I nodded toward the 3 Quilorians who were regrouping, joined now by the 4th who had recovered from my earlier shot. Elijah's face split into that reckless grin I knew all too well. "The old-fashioned way." Before I could ask what he meant, he had scooped up the bomb in one arm, pulled me to my feet with the other, and was running directly at the Quilorians. They raised their weapons, but hesitated. Afraid of hitting the bomb, I realized. Elijah used that moment of hesitation to barrel straight through their formation, shoving aliens aside as we charged toward the ejection system. We reached the hatch, and Elijah punched in another override code. The door slid open to reveal a small chamber with a cylindrical pod at its center. "Get in!" he shouted, pushing me through the door. I stumbled into the chamber, my injury making me clumsy. Elijah followed, sealing the door behind us just as the Quilorians opened fire. Their energy blasts impacted harmlessly against the reinforced metal. "The pod's only designed for waste disposal," Elijah said, placing the bomb carefully inside the cylinder. "But it should work for our purposes." The countdown timer now read 112 seconds. Elijah worked feverishly at the pod's controls. "The ejection system's designed to propel waste a safe distance from the station before releasing it," he explained. "But we need it to go much further." "Can you override the safety protocols?" I asked, trying to help despite the pain radiating from my side. "Already on it," he replied, fingers flying over the keypad. "But there's a problem. The override requires authorization from the station's main computer, and we're locked out." "So we're stuck?" "Not necessarily." Elijah paused, then looked at me with an expression I'd seen before. Right before he did something either brilliant or suicidal, often both. "There is one way to boost the ejection power without authorization." "How?" "By going with it." I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "The pod's mass sensitive," he explained rapidly. "It adjusts thrust based on weight." If I'm inside, it'll significantly increase the ejection power, enough to get the bomb clear of the station. That's insane. You'd be blown to pieces. Not if I time it right. He tapped the pod's exterior. These things have emergency escape hatches. Normally they're locked until the pod reaches its designated release point, but I can hardwire a manual override. In less than... I glanced at the bomb. 90 seconds, while traveling through space at ejection velocity? I've done more with less, he said with a shrug that didn't quite hide his uncertainty. A tremendous bang shook the door behind us. The Quilorians were trying to break through. There's no time to argue, Elijah said, climbing into the pod alongside the bomb. Once I'm clear, get to the bridge and alert security about the remaining Quilorians. Elijah, I began, but he cut me off. I know what I'm doing, Tarin. His expression softened slightly. Trust me, one last time. Before I could respond, he had sealed the pod's door from the inside. Through the small viewport, I could see him giving me a thumbs up, that infuriating smirk back on his face. I hesitated only a moment before activating the ejection sequence. The chamber hummed as the pod was loaded into the launch tube. On the control panel, a display showed the pod's trajectory, a straight line away from the station, into open space. The ejection countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With a whoosh of compressed air, the pod shot from the station. Through the external viewport, I watched it rapidly shrinking into the distance, a tiny silver speck against the vast backdrop of stars. The door behind me finally gave way, and the Quilorians burst into the chamber. I spun around, raising my weapon, but it was too late. They had me surrounded. Surrender, human, their leader demanded. I checked the external viewport one last time. The pod was now just a distant point of light. Then suddenly a flash, brilliant and silent in the vacuum of space. The bomb had detonated. My heart sank. There was no way Elijah could have survived that blast, escape hatch or no escape hatch. Lieutenant Commander Elijah Bennett, Earth's greatest hero and most troublesome diplomat, was gone. I lowered my weapon slowly, a strange calm settling over me. I surrender, I told the Quilorians. But you should know something. What is that? Their leader asked. I smiled grimly. You just made the biggest mistake of your lives. I wish I could say I followed that badass statement with some equally impressive action sequence where I single-handedly defeated the remaining Quilorians. The truth is considerably less heroic. They took me prisoner, confiscated my weapon, and marched me through the maintenance corridors toward what I assumed would be a waiting escape vessel. My injury was making it hard to walk, but they showed no concern, prodding me forward with their energy weapons. Your companion's sacrifice was pointless, the Quilorian leader informed me as we walked. The bomb was merely Phase 1. Even without it, this station will be destroyed. Why? I asked, trying to keep them talking while I searched for an opportunity to escape. What does the Quilorian Empire gain from attacking a diplomatic summit? The summit itself is irrelevant, the leader replied. It is this star system that must be cleansed. Proxima Centauri has been chosen as the site of our new gateway. Gateway to what? The Quilorian made a series of clicks that the translator didn't process. Laughter, perhaps? To everything human, to the spaces between spaces. Whatever that meant, it couldn't be good. But before I could ask more questions, we rounded a corner and came face to face with a security team. 3 Arthropian guards and a Draconian officer. For a moment, everyone froze in surprise. Then all hell broke loose. The Quilorians opened fire first, energy blasts filling the corridor with deadly light. The security team responded in kind, forcing me to drop to the floor to avoid being caught in the crossfire. I crawled toward a recessed doorway, seeking cover from the firefight. My side burned with pain, but adrenaline kept me moving. From my sheltered position, I watched as the security team gradually gained the upper hand, their superior numbers telling against the remaining Quilorians. When the last Quilorian fell, I emerged cautiously from my hiding spot, hands raised to show I wasn't a threat. First Officer Voss, the Draconian officer, recognized me immediately. Where is Lieutenant Commander Bennett? The question hit me like a physical blow. He didn't make it. The Quilorians had a bomb. He ejected it from the station, but I couldn't finish the sentence. The reality of Elijah's death was finally sinking in, leaving a hollow feeling in my chest. The Draconian's expression was unreadable to my human eyes, but his voice softened slightly. He died with honor, then. One of the Arthropian guards approached, mandibles clicking anxiously. Sir, the prisoner mentioned a Phase 1. There may be additional threats to the station. The Draconian nodded. We must alert Central Security and get this human to medical. He gestured toward my injury. As they led me toward the medical bay, I recounted everything I had learned about the Quilorians' plan. The bomb, the mention of a gateway, and the ominous reference to cleansing the star system. A gateway, the Draconian mused. There are legends of the ancient Quilorian Empire possessing technology that could create artificial wormholes. But such technology would require immense energy, more than even an antimatter reactor could provide. Unless, one of the Arthropians suggested, they plan to use the star itself. The implications were staggering. If the Quilorians had found a way to harness the energy of Proxima Centauri, they could potentially create a stable wormhole large enough to move their entire fleet through, directly into the heart of Confederation space. We reached the medical bay, which was chaotic with injured delegates being treated by the station's medical staff. A human doctor noticed us and hurried over. "Another casualty from the explosion?" she asked, examining my wound. "Explosion?" I repeated, confused. "In the south docking bay," she explained, guiding me to an examination table. "Some kind of terrorist attack. At least that's the official story being circulated." I exchanged glances with the Draconian officer. The station authorities were keeping the Quilorian threat quiet to avoid panic. "Doctor," the Draconian said, "this patient requires immediate treatment and privacy." She nodded, understanding the implied security concerns, and led us to a separate treatment room. As she worked on my injury, a moderate energy burn that looked worse than it was, I continued debriefing the security team. "The remaining Quilorians mentioned something about a Phase 2, I said. "Whatever they're planning, losing the bomb hasn't stopped them." "The station has been placed on highest alert," the Draconian assured me. "Every deck is being searched. If there are more Quilorians aboard, we will find them." But I wasn't so sure. If they had managed to smuggle a bomb and a strike team onto the most secure diplomatic station in the galaxy, what else might they have accomplished undetected? As the doctor finished treating my wound, a commotion outside drew our attention. Raised voices, then the treatment room door burst open. Ambassador Krasthul stood in the doorway, his massive frame nearly filling the opening. Behind him I could see more Draconian security personnel. "First Officer Voss," he rumbled. "I require your assistance immediately." I sat up, wincing at the pull on my freshly treated injury. "Ambassador, with all due respect, I'm in no condition to—" "It concerns your commander," Krasthul interrupted. "Lieutenant Commander Bennett." My heart skipped a beat. "What about him?" "He is alive, and he has sent a message." 20 minutes later, I was in the station's main communications center, surrounded by the highest-ranking security officers from a dozen species. Ambassador Krasthul loomed beside me as a technician prepared to play Elijah's message. "We received this transmission approximately 40 minutes ago," a Centaurian officer explained. "It was heavily encrypted and specifically addressed to Draconian diplomatic security." I frowned. Why the Draconians? Krasthul's scales rippled in what I had come to recognize as the Draconian equivalent of a shrug. "Perhaps because we are the only species your Commander Bennett respects." Before I could respond to that dubious claim, the view screen flickered to life. Elijah's face appeared, looking somewhat worse for wear, a nasty cut above his right eye, soot marks on his face but very much alive. "This is Lieutenant Commander Elijah Bennett of Earth," he began, his voice tinny through the station's speakers. "If you're receiving this, then the good news is the bomb didn't destroy the station. The bad news is, well, everything else." He shifted, and the camera angle widened to show he was in some kind of small craft. An escape pod, I realized, though not the same one he had ejected with the bomb. "I managed to jettison the bomb and bail out before detonation," he continued. "Proximity alarms on a passing Gelth freighter picked me up, but that's not important right now. What is important is what I discovered on my way back to the station." The view changed to show a massive structure in orbit around Proxima Centauri, a ring-shaped device that hadn't been there when we arrived at the summit. "The Quilorians have already begun construction of their gateway," Elijah's voice explained over the footage. "From what I can tell, they're using automated construction ships. No life signs detected. But the real problem is this." The image shifted again, this time showing what appeared to be a fleet of ships in formation at the edge of the star system. "A Quilorian battle fleet," Elijah said grimly. "At least 50 vessels, maybe more. They're holding position just outside sensor range of the station, which is why they haven't been detected yet. My guess is they're waiting for the gateway to be completed before they make their move." He reappeared on screen. "I'm transmitting my coordinates along with this message. I'm currently shadowing one of the automated construction vessels, trying to gather more intelligence. But you need to evacuate that station immediately. Once the gateway is operational, the Quilorians won't need subterfuge anymore. They'll launch a direct assault." The message ended, freezing on Elijah's determined face. For a moment, the communication center was silent as everyone processed this information. Then everyone started speaking at once, a cacophony of different languages and translator devices creating an indecipherable din. Krasthul silenced them with a thunderous roar.
Enough!
This is no time for debate. We must act. The ambassador is right, I said, stepping forward despite the pain in my side. But evacuation isn't an option. There are over 10,000 people on this station, including the diplomatic delegations from every major power in the Confederation. We'd need hundreds of ships, and even then, the Quilorian fleet would pick us off one by one as we fled. Then what do you suggest, human? A Centaurian official demanded. That we sit here and wait for annihilation? I studied the frozen image of the Quilorian gateway on the view screen. We fight back. We destroy that gateway before it becomes operational. With what? Scoffed a Gelth representative, their gelatinous form rippling with skepticism. The station has minimal defensive capabilities, and the few military vessels present are diplomatic escorts, not warships. We don't need warships, I said, an idea forming. We need Commander Bennett. All eyes turned to me. Explain, Krasthul demanded. I pointed to the coordinates Elijah had transmitted with his message. He's close to the gateway. If we can get him the right equipment, he could sabotage it from within. A suicide mission, the Centaurian observed. A possibility of survival, I countered, which is more than we'll have if that gateway activates and the Quilorian fleet comes through. A heated debate followed, with representatives arguing over the feasibility of my plan, the reliability of Elijah's information, and whether we should attempt to negotiate with the Quilorians instead. Throughout it all, Ambassador Krasthul remained silent, his reptilian gaze fixed on me with an intensity that was unsettling. When the arguments had circled back on themselves for the third time, he finally spoke. The human plan has merit, he announced, silencing the room. I will provide a vessel and equipment from the Draconian diplomatic contingent. The offer stunned everyone, myself included. The Draconians were notoriously protective of their military technology. Ambassador, the Centaurian protested, Draconian law forbids sharing advanced weaponry with other species. Krasthul's scales darkened, a sign of irritation. I am aware of our laws, Centaurian. I am also aware that if the Quilorians establish a beachhead in this system, the Confederation as we know it will cease to exist. He turned to me. Will you undertake this mission, First Officer Voss? I nodded without hesitation. I will. Then it is decided, Krasthul declared, as if daring anyone to contradict him. None did. As the others dispersed to make preparations, Krasthul drew me aside. Your Commander Bennett, he said quietly. He is unusual for a human. That's one way of putting it, I agreed. Earlier today, I considered him an irritant, a diplomatic embarrassment to be tolerated. Now it seems the fate of the Confederation rests in his hands. Krasthul's expression shifted into what might have been the Draconian equivalent of bemusement. The universe has a strange sense of humor. I couldn't help but smile at that. You have no idea, Ambassador. An hour later, I was aboard a Draconian scout vessel, one of the fastest and most advanced ships in known space. Its sleek, predatory design reflected its creator's nature, all sharp angles and lethal efficiency. The Draconian pilot, a taciturn officer named Zexkar, had said perhaps 10 words since our departure from the station. He seemed to view me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, but his flying was impeccable as we slipped past the Quilorian sensor perimeter. In the cargo hold behind us was the equipment Ambassador Krasthul had promised, a prototype disruptor device that, according to the brief explanation I'd received, could theoretically destabilize the quantum matrix of the Quilorian gateway. The technical details were beyond my understanding, but the bottom line was simple. Get it to the gateway, activate it, and get out before everything went boom. The get out part was where things got tricky. Approaching coordinates, Zexkar announced, breaking his silence. Prepare for stealth protocols. The ship's lights dimmed as we switched to minimal power emissions, the hum of the engines dropping to a whisper. On the view screen, I could see the massive ring of the Quilorian gateway growing larger, a perfect circle of alien metal suspended against the backdrop of Proxima Centauri, its surface alive with pulsing energy patterns. Life signs? I asked. Zexkar checked his instruments. None detected. The construction vessels appear to be fully automated, as your commander reported. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. Can you locate Bennett's signal? The Draconian manipulated the sensor controls. There is a small craft at coordinates 227 Mark 43, approximately 500 kilometers from the gateway. Minimal power signature, but it matches the transmission profile from the earlier message. That's him, I said with certainty. Can we establish communication? Inadvisable. Even a tight beam transmission might be detected. Then we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way. Take us in, slow and quiet. Zex-Kar guided the scout ship on a careful approach vector, using the shadow of a construction vessel for cover as we drew closer to Elijah's position. Through the view screen, I could now see his craft, a standard emergency escape pod, barely large enough for one person. "Prepare for retrieval," Zex-Kar instructed, activating the ship's docking mechanism. I moved to the airlock, my side still aching from my earlier injury, but adrenaline pushing the pain to the background. As the docking sequence completed with a soft thunk, I operated the manual override to open the outer door. Elijah stumbled through the opening, looking considerably worse than he had in his transmission. His uniform was torn and scorched, his face streaked with blood and soot, but his eyes still held that unmistakable gleam of reckless determination. "Tarin," he grinned, catching himself against the bulkhead. "Fancy meeting you here?" "You look terrible," I said, helping him steady himself. "You should see the other guy," he quipped, then noticed Zex-Kar at the controls. "A Draconian vessel? How did you manage that?" "Ambassador Kraz Thul sends his regards," I replied dryly. "Apparently you've made quite an impression." Elijah laughed, then winced, clutching his side. "Cracked ribs," he explained, seeing my concern. "Ejecting from a pod at high velocity isn't as fun as it sounds." "We can compare injuries later," I said, guiding him to the co-pilot's seat. "Right now, we have a gateway to destroy, and a confederation to save." As Zex-Kar maneuvered us closer to the massive Quilorian structure, I quickly briefed Elijah on our plan and the disruptor device we'd brought. "So let me get this straight," Elijah said when I'd finished. "We're going to sneak aboard an alien superweapon, plant an experimental device that may or may not work, and then try to escape before everything goes catastrophically wrong?" "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. He grinned, just like old times. "Approaching optimal deployment position," Zex-Kar announced, his voice devoid of emotion despite the danger we were facing. "The construction vessels have established a regular patrol pattern. We will have a 47-second window to approach the gateway undetected." Elijah studied the sensor display, his expression growing serious. "That's not going to work," he said. "Look at the energy readings on the gateway. Those pulses are getting stronger and more frequent. It's almost operational." "How can you tell?" I asked. "Because I've spent the last 2 hours studying it," he replied. "The Quilorians are using some kind of quantum acceleration technology. The construction process that should take days is happening in hours." Zex-Kar hissed softly, a Draconian expression of concern. "If the gateway activates while we are nearby, we become the first casualties of the invasion," Elijah finished grimly. "We need a new plan." He turned to me. "The disruptor device, how does it work?" I explained what little I understood about the Draconian technology. "It generates a cascading quantum disruption that should destabilize the gateway's molecular structure, but it needs to be placed at the primary control node to be effective." "And where exactly is this control node?" I hesitated. "According to the Draconians, at the exact center of the gateway." Elijah stared at me. "The center? As in, the middle of that giant ring of highly energized alien technology that we need to destroy?" "That's right." "Well," he sighed, "nobody said saving the galaxy would be easy." He turned to Zex-Kar. "Can this ship survive a direct approach to the gateway? Just long enough to drop someone off?" The Draconian scales rippled in what might have been alarm. "Theoretically, yes, but the energy discharges from the gateway would cripple our systems within seconds of direct exposure. We would be unable to maintain position. So a quick drop-off and a very fast retreat," Elijah mused. "What about recovery?" "Impossible under those conditions," Zex-Kar stated flatly. "Whoever places the device would be stranded." A heavy silence fell over the cockpit as the implications sank in. "I'll do it," Elijah said finally. "No," I protested immediately. "You've already nearly died once today. It's my turn." "Your injury would slow you down," he countered. "And I've had more experience with EVA operations in hostile environments." "That's not—" "He is correct," Zex-Kar interrupted, his reptilian eyes fixing on me. "The human Bennett is the logical choice for this mission." I wanted to argue further, but I knew they were right. With my injured side, I'd be at a significant disadvantage in the zero-G environment of the gateway. "Fine," I conceded reluctantly, "but we need a way to get you out of there after you plant the device." Elijah studied the sensor display again, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, suddenly, his face lit up with that familiar expression, the one that usually preceded his most brilliant or most disastrous ideas. "The construction vessels," he said. "They're automated, right? Following pre-programmed paths between the supply depot and the gateway?" Zex-Kar nodded. "Correct. And they dock with the gateway at regular intervals to deliver materials and perform maintenance. Yes, but... So if I can get aboard one after placing the disruptor, I could ride it out to a safe distance before the gateway detonates. I frowned. How would you even get aboard? Those vessels are sealed and automated. Every automated system has maintenance access, Elijah replied confidently. Even Quilorians need to perform repairs occasionally. That is... Zexkar seemed to search for the right word. Optimistic. Sometimes optimism is all we've got, Elijah said with a shrug. Besides, it beats the alternative of being vaporized when the gateway explodes. He turned to me. What's the blast radius on that disruptor? The Draconians estimate about 1,000 kilometers, I said. But that's just a theory. This device has never been tested in field conditions, so I need to be more than 1,000 kilometers away when it goes off. How long after activation until detonation? 10 minutes, give or take a few seconds. Elijah nodded, mentally calculating. The construction vessels move at about 100 kilometers per minute when transiting between the gateway and the depot. That should be enough time to get clear, assuming I can find a way aboard. It was a desperate plan. With a dozen ways it could go catastrophically wrong. But as Elijah had said, it beat the alternative. Zexkar, I said, turning to the Draconian pilot. Can you track the construction vessels and identify which one will be docking with the gateway next? He manipulated the sensor controls. Vessel designated Alpha 7 will dock in approximately 12 minutes at the southern quadrant of the gateway. That's our target, Elijah decided. Drop me off at the center, I'll plant the disruptor, then make my way to the southern quadrant and board Alpha 7 before it departs. And if you can't board it in time? I asked. His expression softened slightly. Then it's been an honor serving with you, First Officer Voss. I wanted to protest further, to find another solution, but time was running out. The energy pulses from the gateway were growing stronger by the minute. If we didn't act soon, it would be too late. The honor has been mine, Commander, I said instead, matching his formal tone. Then, unable to maintain the professional distance, I added, just try not to die this time, okay? The paperwork would be hell. He laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily dispelled the tension. I'll do my best. While Zexkar prepared the ship for our approach, Elijah and I moved to the cargo hold to retrieve the disruptor device and prepare his EVA gear. The Draconian vessel was equipped with advanced spacesuits that made our Tarin models look primitive by comparison. Nice outfit, Elijah commented as he examined the sleek, scale-patterned suit. Think they make these in my size? The suits adapt to the wearer's physiology, I explained, helping him into the complex garment. Just be careful with the propulsion system. It's more sensitive than what you're used to. As I assisted him with the final connections, a strange feeling came over me. A sense of déjà vu mixed with foreboding. We'd been in desperate situations before, Elijah and I, but something about this mission felt different. Final somehow. Tarin, Elijah said softly as if reading my thoughts. If this doesn't work, it will, I interrupted firmly. But if it doesn't, he persisted, I want you to know something. All those times I've driven you crazy with my stunts and my disregard for protocol, I never meant to make your job harder. You just can't help being you, I finished for him. I know, Elijah, and despite all the gray hairs you've given me, I wouldn't have it any other way. He smiled, an uncharacteristically vulnerable expression on his usually confident face. Same here. The moment was interrupted by Zexkar's voice over the comm system. We are approaching the deployment position. Prepare for EVA operations. Elijah sealed his helmet, gave me a final thumbs up, and moved to the airlock. I returned to the cockpit, where Zexkar was guiding our ship on a direct course toward the center of the massive Quilorian gateway. Through the view screen, the structure was both beautiful and terrifying. A perfect circle of gleaming alien metal, pulsing with energy that distorted the space around it. At the center was a smaller ring, which according to our scans was the control node where Elijah would need to place the disruptor. Approaching optimal deployment range, Zexkar announced. Energy levels rising, ship systems beginning to experience interference. The cockpit lights flickered, and the sensor display became erratic. We were feeling the effects of the gateway's power, and we weren't even at the center yet. Airlock depressurization complete. Elijah's voice came through the comm. Ready for deployment. Understood, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Remember, you'll have limited communication once you're out there. The gateway's energy field will create interference. Copy that. I'll signal when the disruptor is placed. Zexkar maneuvered the ship as close to the center of the gateway as he dared. The entire vessel was now shuddering from the energy discharges washing over us. This is as close as we can safely approach, the Draconian said, his normally impassive voice showing signs of strain. Ship systems are at 60% efficiency and declining rapidly. It'll have to do, I replied. Elijah, you're clear for EVA. Good luck? Luck is for amateurs, came his cocky response. I've got skill on my side. A moment later, the external cameras showed Elijah launching from the airlock, the Draconian suit's propulsion system carrying him smoothly toward the center of the gateway. His figure quickly grew smaller against the massive alien structure. We must retreat immediately, Zexkar insisted. Ship systems are approaching critical failure thresholds. I hated to leave Elijah, but staying would only doom us all. Do it, I ordered. Get us to a safe observation position. As our ship pulled away from the gateway, I kept my eyes fixed on the small figure of Elijah, now barely visible against the pulsing energy of the control node. The comm system crackled with static, occasionally allowing fragments of his voice to come through. Approaching target, significant interference, adjusting course. Then silence. Can you boost the signal? I asked Zexkar. The Draconian manipulated several controls but shook his head. The gateway's energy field is creating too much interference. We will not have reliable communication until he is clear of the center. All we could do now was watch and wait. On the view screen, I could still make out Elijah's tiny form as he reached the control node. He appeared to be securing himself to the structure, then working with something in his hands. The disruptor device. He has reached the target, Zexkar observed. Now we must hope he can reach the construction vessel in time. According to our plan, Elijah had just 10 minutes to make his way from the center of the gateway to the southern quadrant, where construction vessel Alpha 7 would be docking. In that bulky suit, fighting against the gateway's energy discharges, it would be a challenging journey. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. 5 minutes after Elijah had reached the control node, we saw his figure begin moving again, pushing away from the center and navigating toward the southern section of the gateway. He's on the move, I said, relief evident in my voice. Can we get any communication yet? Zexkar adjusted the